but the harder it tried to suppress him, the more outspoken he became, until finally he was questioning the authority of the Pope himself. No ecclesiast, however lofty, he declared, could tell a Christian how to behave or think. By the summer of 1520, the threat posed by Luther had become so great that Pope Leo X signed a bull threatening to excommunicate him if he did not appear in Rome and recant. Luther responded by burning the bull. Demanding an independent hearing, he finally got one in April 1521 when he was summoned before the imperial diet of the German nation meeting in Worms. Standing before the emperor and a phalanx of imperial and ecclesiastical officials, Luther refused to retract what he had written, declaring that he could not act against his conscience. This moment, when a lone individual appealing to his conscience stood fast before the highest authorities in the land, is considered by many a milestone in Western history, the moment when the medieval gave way to the modern. Luther's defiance would inspire a broad revolt against Rome, the Protestant Reformation, that would break the 1,000-year hold of the Church on the spiritual life of the West. It would also push Erasmus off the historical stage. In just a few years, the Dutchman would go from being Europe's most renowned thinker to a largely ignored figure, scorned by both Catholics for being too critical of the Church and Protestants for being too timid. After his death in 1536, Erasmus was all but forgotten as Europe experienced a century of religious strife. Even today, his works are only sporadically read, and his ideas receive scant attention. They deserve to be revived, for Erasmus was an architect of the Northern Renaissance. While Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael were revolutionizing Western art and culture, Erasmus was helping to transform the continent's intellectual and religious life. In some ways, he represents the path not taken. At a time of rising nationalism, he was a committed internationalist. In an age of persecution and incessant war, he urged tolerance and promoted peace, and he argued that religion should be more about conduct than doctrine. Erasmus was, in short, the leading exponent of Christian humanism, extolling human dignity, modest piety, and brotherhood in a world gripped by zealotry, rancor, and sectarianism. In his books and essays, Erasmus laid out a program to reform and revitalize European culture. His Enchiridion Militis Christiani, the Handbook of the Militant Christian, became a manual for Europe's growing middle class, as it sought a form of inner spirituality more fulfilling than the performance of formal acts like going to confession or visiting a shrine. The Praise of Folly, with its barbed put-downs of pedantic theologians and self-seeking princes, helped puncture the pretensions and excesses of Europe's ruling elite. The Adages, a thick compendium of aphorisms culled from ancient Greek and Rome and explained in lively essays, did more than any other work to revive interest in classical culture. Erasmus's treatises on education helped shape Western pedagogy for centuries, and his colloquies, colorful dialogues and sketches based on everyday life, offered sharp observations on the customs and conventions of 16th century Europe. Above all, Erasmus revolutionized the study of the Bible. At the time, the Vulgate was the source of all teaching and doctrine in the Western Church, its language consecrated by centuries of tradition and decree. Prepared during the waning days of imperial Rome, it was a Latin translation from the original Greek, in the case of the New Testament, and Hebrew in the case of the Old. And its accuracy was coming under challenge. Many of its words and phrases seemed to diverge from their original meaning, and misspellings and other errors had been introduced by nodding scribes. Intent on correcting it, Erasmus spent years struggling to learn Greek so that he could read old manuscripts of the New Testament in its original tongue. In 1516, after much toil, he came out with his revised edition, which included a Greek text, an amended Latin translation, and annotations explaining the reasoning behind his changes. Erasmus's New Testament, offering scholars and exegetes